Derek's office occupied the 14th floor with glass walls on three sides, offering a view of the city that probably cost more in annual rent than Marcus made in 3 years. The furniture was minimalist, chrome and leather, everything sharp angles and cold surfaces. Awards lined one wall, photographs of Derek shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. Power plays everywhere Marcus looked. Derek gestured to the chair across from his desk, settling into his own seat with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his professional life. Something in his expression made unease crawl up Marcus's spine. Not hostility exactly, more like a predator assessing prey. "I'll be direct, Mr. Williams." Derek folded his hands on the desk, manicured nails catching the light. "I know why you're here. I know Victoria Morrison vouched for you, and I know exactly why she felt compelled to do so. I've reviewed the police report from the accident, spoken to the responding officers, confirmed the timeline. You did indeed help Mrs. Morrison and her daughter, and you did indeed miss your original interview as a result." Marcus waited, hearing the butt coming from a mile away. Derek's pause was calculated, theatrical. "Here's the situation. Victoria Morrison is a major stakeholder in this company. Her father founded Morrison Property Group, and she holds significant influence despite not being involved in day-to-day operations. When she makes a request, we listen." Another pause, eyes sharp and assessing. "However, I am the one who actually runs this hotel chain, Mr. Williams. I hire the people, I set the standards, and I don't appreciate anyone, no matter how well connected, attempting to circumvent our normal hiring procedures." Marcus kept his voice level despite the anger starting to simmer. "I didn't ask her to do this, she offered. I'm aware. Which is the only reason we're having this conversation instead of security escorting you out." Derek leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I've reviewed your qualifications. You're experienced, knowledgeable, and from what I understand, you performed well in your interview today. Under normal circumstances, you'd be a strong candidate. But these aren't normal circumstances, are they?" "What are you saying?" Derek's smile was thin, sharp. "I'm saying that if I hire you, it will always be because Victoria Morrison made a phone call. Your coworkers will know it, your supervisors will know it, and every time you make a mistake, every time you're late or mess up or fail to meet expectations, people will assume it's because you're protected, because you have connections, that you don't actually deserve to be here." His tone shifted, became almost conversational. "I've seen it happen before. Breeds resentment, damages team morale, creates the perception that this company values personal relationships over professional competence. Makes my job significantly harder." Marcus felt his hands curl into fists on his lap. "So you're not going to hire me?" "I didn't say that." Derek pulled out a folder from his desk drawer, slid it across the polished surface. "I'm offering you a choice." The folder contained a legal document, multiple pages of dense text. Marcus opened it, scanning the contents with growing disbelief. Non-disclosure agreement, confidentiality clauses, restrictions on communication. Derek's voice continued, measured and professional. "You can accept this position with the understanding that your connection to Victoria Morrison remains strictly confidential. You signed this agreement promising never to reveal how you came to work here, never to leverage your relationship with the Morrison family for any professional advantage, and," he paused for emphasis, "never to contact or pursue any personal or romantic relationship with Victoria Morrison while you remain employed at Summit Ridge Hotels." The last clause made Marcus's eyes snap up from the document. "Romantic relationship? Why would that even?" "Because I've been doing this job for 20 years, Mr. Williams, and I know how these situations develop. Gratitude transforms into familiarity, familiarity breeds attraction, and suddenly we have a facilities supervisor dating a major shareholder's daughter. The optics alone would be catastrophic, not to mention the complications it would create for corporate governance." Derek's expression remained neutral, clinical. "This protects everyone involved. You become just another employee. No special treatment, no exceptions, no complications." Marcus stared at the document, feeling the trap close around him. Victoria's face flashed through his mind, the way her walls had cracked in that coffee shop, The genuine warmth that had broken through her careful control, the possibility that had sparked between them, unexpected and unwelcome and undeniable. Or, Derek continued, pulling out a second folder, you walk away right now. I'll personally ensure you receive a generous consulting fee for your discretion. $50,000. Cash. Enough to get you through the next few months while you find another position elsewhere. No one needs to know about this conversation. You take care of your financial problems, and we part ways professionally. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. $50,000. That was rent for a year, Emma's shoes and clothes and school supplies. The electric bill paid off. The phone reconnected. Breathing room, actual breathing room, for the first time in 6 months. Derek's voice dropped, became almost sympathetic. I understand your position, Mr. Williams. Single father, mounting debts, limited prospects. I've seen your financial records. Part of our standard background check. You're drowning. This money could save you. Or this job could save you if you're willing to accept the necessary boundaries. Marcus looked up from the folders, met Derek's eyes directly. You want me to pretend I don't know her, to cut off contact completely. I want to protect the integrity of this organization. If you're as qualified as you claim, you'll have no problem succeeding on your own merits. If you're not, Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, at least Victoria Morrison will never know her charity case failed. The words were designed to humiliate, to diminish. Marcus felt them land like strikes to the chest. Charity case. As if saving a woman and child from a burning car somehow made him a beggar, reduced him to someone who needed to be bought off or controlled. He thought about Emma asking if they were going to be okay. Thought about the bills on his kitchen table and the math that didn't work, and the shame of watching his daughter offer to share her lunch because she'd learned too young that needing things meant watching your father fail. Thought about Victoria's gratitude transforming into something else in that coffee shop. Something fragile and genuine that Derek was now trying to crush before it could even breathe. Marcus stood slowly, carefully, like he was moving through water. He looked at the folder on the desk, at Derek's expectant face, at the city spread out below them through the glass walls. All those people living their lives completely unaware that up here on the 14th floor, a man was being offered a choice between his dignity and his daughter's future. His voice came out steady, certain. No. Derek's eyebrows rose slightly. No. I'm not signing your agreement, and I'm not taking your money. Derek's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. Mr. Williams, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. You need this job, or you need that money. Walking away with nothing is the only choice I can live with. Marcus's voice gained strength. You're right that I need this job. You're right that I'm desperate. But my daughter is watching me, learning from me, figuring out what kind of person she wants to be based on what kind of person I am. The words came faster now, conviction building. I can't teach her that being afraid of the truth is acceptable, that making yourself small and silent so powerful men feel comfortable is the price of survival. Victoria Morrison offered me a second chance because I did the right thing at that accident. If I take this position under your conditions, I'd be proving that doing the right thing was stupid, that I should have driven past that car, shown up on time, climbed over whoever I needed to climb over to get ahead. Marcus leaned forward, hands flat on Derek's desk. Is that really the lesson you want me teaching my kid? That integrity is something you sell when the price gets high enough. Derek's expression had gone cold, shuddered. You're making a mistake, Mr. Williams, a significant one. Maybe, but at least it's my mistake. Marcus straightened, turned toward the door, paused to look back. At least I can look my daughter in the eye tonight and tell her that her father didn't sell himself out for a paycheck. That some things matter more than money. That we'd rather struggle together with our dignity intact than prosper on our knees. He walked out of Derek Hammond's office, through the gleaming lobby, into the afternoon sun. Didn't let himself think about what he'd just done until he was sitting in his truck with his hands on the steering wheel and his heart pounding like it was trying to break free from his chest. Then the reality crashed over him. He'd just walked away from $50,000 in a job that could have saved Emma from poverty. Walked away because of pride, because of principle, because of some idealistic notion that dignity mattered more than survival. Maybe he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. His phone felt heavy in his hand as he pulled it out. Victoria's number was right there in his recent calls. She needed to know what happened. Needed to know that her attempt to help had been twisted into something ugly by Derek Hammond's need for control. Marcus pressed call before he could talk himself out of it. She answered on the second ring, voice bright. Marcus, how did it go? Did they make you an offer? I need to tell you something. His tone made her pause. What happened? Marcus told her everything. The interview with Robert Chen going well, Derek Hammond pulling him aside, the 14th floor office with its panoramic views. The ultimatum, sign the NDA or take $50,000. The clause about never contacting Victoria, never pursuing any relationship with her. Derek's condescending words about charity cases and integrity. His own refusal, the speech about teaching Emma, walking away from both the goal and the money. When he finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. For a horrible moment, Marcus thought she might be angry, might think he'd thrown away the opportunities she'd worked to create for him, might regret ever getting involved with someone who let pride override practicality. Then Victoria's voice came through, very quiet and very deadly. That son of a bitch. Marcus felt relief flood through him at the fury in her tone. I'm sorry. I know you went out on a limb for me, and don't you dare apologize. Her voice had gone sharp, dangerous in a way Marcus hadn't heard before. Derek had no right to do that, no authority to make those demands. He works for my father, not the other way around, and he seems to have forgotten that. Victoria, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She cut him off, fierce and certain. Sophie asked me yesterday if the nice man was happy now, if helping us made his life better. And I told her yes, because I wanted to believe it. But if I let Derek Hammond get away with this, I'll be teaching my daughter the same lesson you refuse to teach yours. That powerful people can do whatever they want, and the rest of us just have to accept it. Something in her voice shifted, became steel wrapped in silk. Give me 24 hours. Don't make any other plans. Don't take any other jobs. Can you do that? Marcus didn't know what she had in mind, but found himself trusting her completely. Okay. The next 24 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. He went home to Emma, who asked about the interview with her 7-year-old's hopeful eagerness. Marcus kept his answer carefully vague. Went well, waiting to hear back, because he couldn't bear to see her face fall again. Couldn't watch her learn one more time that trying hard and doing right didn't guarantee anything except disappointment. That night, he lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and replaying the scene in Derek's office, wondering if he'd been a fool. $50,000 could have changed everything. Could have been the difference between Emma having shoes that fit and continuing to limp through her childhood, between keeping the electricity on and sitting in the dark, between dignity and survival. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma's face asking if they were going to be okay. And he knew. With a certainty that lived deeper than logic, that teaching her to surrender who you are for what you need was worse than any poverty. Some prices were too high even when you couldn't afford not to pay them. His phone rang at 2:43 in the afternoon the next day. Unknown number. Marcus's hand shook slightly as he answered. Mr. Williams, this is James Morrison. The voice was gruff, businesslike, with an edge of something that might have been amusement. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. James Morrison, the James Morrison, calling him directly. Yes, sir? I understand you met my daughter under rather dramatic circumstances, and I understand you turned down a job offer from Derek Hammond because you didn't like the strings attached. Marcus's throat went dry. That's correct. The sound was non-committal. Marcus heard papers shuffling on the other end. I also understand that you scored 95 on our technical competency assessment, highest score we've seen in 5 years. Marcus's breath caught. He hadn't known there was a score, hadn't known anyone had even looked at the assessment beyond checking that he'd completed it. Derek certainly hadn't mentioned it. James Morrison continued. Derek was required to administer that assessment after Victoria and I had a rather pointed conversation about hiring practices and the difference between nepotism and gratitude. He was also required to share the results with me directly. Interesting that he didn't share them with you, wouldn't you say? I didn't know there was a test, sir. Derek never told me the results. Yes, well, the amusement in James's voice became more pronounced. Derek has a tendency to withhold information when it doesn't serve his interests. You passed anyway, which suggests to me that Victoria's faith in you wasn't misplaced. A pause, then James's tone shifted to something more serious. Mr. Williams, I built my company on the principle that competent people deserve opportunities regardless of how they come to our attention. My daughter vouched for you. You proved yourself through formal assessment, and you demonstrated integrity when offered a compromising situation. As far as I'm concerned, that makes you exactly the kind of employee we need. Marcus didn't trust himself to speak. James Morrison continued, the position is yours if you want it. Derek Hammond has been reassigned to our Las Vegas property, effective immediately. Not a promotion, Mr. Williams, a reassignment. He'll be managing a much smaller operation with significantly less autonomy. The new HR director will be reaching out to you within the hour to discuss terms. No non-disclosure agreements, no secret conditions, no restrictions on who you can and cannot associate with in your personal life. Just a standard employment contract. His voice hardened slightly. Are you interested? Marcus closed his eyes, feeling something hot and tight unwind in his chest. His voice came out rough. Yes, sir, I'm very interested. Good. Welcome to Summit Ridge Hotels, Mr. Williams. Don't make me regret this decision. The line went dead. Marcus sat in his truck, phone still pressed to his ear, trying to process what had just happened. Derek Hammond reassigned. The job offered with no conditions. A 95 on an assessment he hadn't even known he was being graded on. Victoria's father calling personally to make things right. Emma burst through the front door when Marcus pulled into their apartment complex, home from the after-school program. She took one look at his face and her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Dad, what's wrong? What happened? Marcus pulled her into a hug, held her tight enough that she squeaked in protest. Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything's right. Everything's going to be okay. She pulled back far enough to see his face. Did you get the job? Yeah, Marcus laughed, the sound startling him with its genuineness. Yeah, I got the job. Emma screamed with delight, jumping up and down, and Marcus laughed again and swung her around the way he used to when she was smaller. For the first time in 6 months, he felt actual hope, not the desperate kind that comes from having no other choice, but the real kind that comes from seeing that sometimes, just sometimes doing the right thing doesn't destroy you. That night after Emma fell asleep, Marcus pulled out his phone and typed out a message to Victoria. Thank you for everything. I don't know how to repay you. The response came 2 minutes later. Have coffee with me next week. Just us. No business. No daughters. Just us? Marcus stared at the message, pulse quickening. This was different from their first coffee meeting. This was Victoria Morrison asking him on what could only be called a date. This was the possibility that had sparked between them being given permission to breathe. This was dangerous and complicated and everything Marcus's practical side told him to avoid. He typed back, I'd like that. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then Saturday, 10 a.m., same place, and Marcus, I'm really glad Derek didn't win. Marcus set his phone down and leaned back against the couch, letting himself imagine for just a moment what it might be like. Victoria without her walls fully up. Getting to know her not as the woman he'd saved or the heiress who'd saved him, but as herself, building something genuine between 2 people who'd both been burned by life and were brave enough to try again anyway. He didn't let himself think about Derek Hammond sitting in a Las Vegas office, stewing in resentment and wounded pride. Didn't consider that a man like Derek, powerful, vindictive, used to winning, might not accept reassignment as the end of the story. Didn't imagine that sometimes doing the right thing and winning doesn't mean the fight is over. Marcus's first day at Summit Ridge Hotels arrived with September sunshine and Marcus's best shirt, the one Emma had helped him iron the night before, both of them standing in the kitchen practicing his introduction. He arrived at 7:30 for an 8 o'clock start time, old military habits reasserting themselves. Jennifer Park, the new HR director, met him in the lobby with genuine warmth. "Welcome to Summit Ridge, Marcus. We're thrilled to have you on the team." She gave him a tour of the facilities: maintenance control room, equipment storage, the workshop where repairs were staged. Introduced him to the team: 8 technicians ranging from early 20s to late 50s, 2 supervisors, all of them sizing him up with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Marcus's office was small but his own, with a desk and computer and filing cabinets full of documentation on every system in the building. At 9, they had a team meeting. Robert Chen introduced Marcus as the new regional maintenance supervisor and spoke about his experience and qualifications. When Robert finished, Marcus stood to face the team. "I know I'm new here. I know I have a lot to learn about this facility and how you all operate, but I've spent 15 years in the trenches fixing what's broken and preventing what can break. I'm not here to boss anyone around or prove I'm smarter than you. I'm here to work with you. Your experience matters. Your input matters. We're a team." Most of the faces showed cautious acceptance. One older technician, Carl, according to his name tag, maybe late 50s, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades crawling through ducts and crawl spaces, spoke up. "Heard you got hired through connections. That true?" The room went quiet. Marcus met Carl's eyes directly, didn't flinch from the challenge. "I know someone who vouched for me, yes, but I also scored 95 on the technical assessment, which I can show you if you want. I'm here because I'm qualified, and I'm going to prove it every single day." "Fair enough?" Carl studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. We'll see." The first weeks were a careful dance of observation and restraint. Marcus didn't come in demanding change or asserting authority. He spent his days walking the entire facility with each technician, asking questions, taking notes on systems and quirks and ongoing issues. He learned that the East Wing boiler had been temperamental for months, that 3 different contractors had failed to fix it. Carl showed him the problem with barely concealed skepticism. Marcus spent an hour examining the system, tracing lines, checking connections, found the issue others had missed: a pressure sensor installed backwards during a previous repair, creating false readings that triggered safety shutdowns. 30 minutes to fix, and the boiler ran perfectly afterward. Carl grunted, something that might have been approval. "All right, maybe you do know your stuff." By the 3rd week, Marcus noticed a pattern in the maintenance logs: entirely reactive, always responding to emergencies, never preventing them. He proposed implementing a preventive maintenance schedule. Met resistance from technicians who saw it as more work up front. "Less work long-term," Marcus countered, "and fewer 2 a.m. emergency calls pulling you away from your families. Let's pilot it in one building first. If it doesn't work, we go back to the old way." Results came within 2 weeks: 60% reduction in emergency calls, 0 tenant complaints about temperature control, the team actually getting weekends off. The resistance evaporated. They rolled the program out to all properties. Robert Chen noticed and sent Marcus an email. "Corporate is impressed. Keep it up." Friday afternoon of his 3rd week, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Hey, how's the new job going?" He smiled, typed back, "Good, really good. Still can't quite believe it's real." "Believe it. You earned it. Remember you promised me coffee? This Saturday, 10 a.m., same place?" Marcus's heart rate picked up as he read her response. "Perfect. See you then." He stared at his phone afterward, grinning like an idiot. Lisa, one of the younger technicians, who was sharp as a blade and missed nothing, walked past his office and caught the expression. "What's that smile about, boss?" Marcus straightened quickly. "Nothing. Just good news." Lisa's grin suggested she didn't believe him for a second. "Uh-huh. Sure." Saturday morning arrived with Marcus changing his shirt 3 times before settling on the blue one Emma said made him look nice. He arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early again, ordered black coffee, sat at the same table by the window. This time felt different, though. Not a business meeting or a gratitude session. This was 2 people who'd been through fire together, choosing to see if the connection between them could be something more than circumstance. Victoria walked in at exactly 10, and Marcus felt his breath catch. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of business attire, her hair down instead of pulled back. The walls she usually maintained were lower, her expression open and genuinely happy to see him. She slid into the chair across from him. Hi. Hi. They both laughed at the awkwardness, at how different this felt from their first meeting. Victoria ordered coffee, and they started talking. Not about the accident or the bomb or Derek Hammond, but about themselves, about Victoria's divorce 2 years ago, how she and her ex-husband had both worked too much and grown apart, how Sophie's father was a good dad even if he hadn't been the right partner, about being a single mother and how it was the hardest and best thing she'd ever done. Marcus shared about Emma's mother dying in childbirth, how he'd never gotten to thank her for giving him Emma, how every time he looked at his daughter, he saw her mother's smile in miniature, about being terrified and grateful every single day. You're doing a great job with her, Victoria said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Emma's lucky to have you. Marcus's hand tingled where she touched it. He didn't want to pull away. Neither did she, apparently, because her fingers stayed linked with his for a long moment before she withdrew with what looked like reluctance. Her voice came careful, tentative. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Derek's agreement, the clause about not contacting me, did that bother you? Not just professionally, but personally? Marcus's heart pounded, moment of truth. He could deflect, could keep things safe and professional. Or he could be honest. Yeah, he said quietly. It bothered me because I wanted the option to get to know you like this, not as someone I saved or someone who helped me, just as someone I'd like to spend time with. Victoria's smile came slow, genuine, beautiful. I'm glad Derek's gone then, because I wanted that option too. They stayed in that coffee shop for 3 hours, talking and laughing, discovering they had more in common than trauma. When they finally left, Marcus walked Victoria to her car. The goodbye felt weighted with possibility. Victoria leaned up, kissed his cheek. Let's do this again. Soon. Marcus drove home feeling like he was floating, like maybe the universe had decided to stop punishing him for 5 minutes and let something good happen. He didn't know that Derek Hammond, sitting in a cramped office in Las Vegas and staring at performance metrics that weren't his problem anymore, was already making plans, already reaching out to contacts who owed him favors, already plotting how to prove that Marcus Williams was exactly what Derek had always known him to be, an unqualified nobody who'd slept his way into a job he didn't deserve. Marcus's first day at Summit Ridge Hotels arrived with September sunshine and nerves that made his hands unsteady, while Emma helped him iron the blue shirt she'd declared made him look important. He arrived at 7:30 for an 8 o'clock start time, old military habits reasserting themselves. Jennifer Park met him in the lobby with genuine warmth that felt worlds away from the cold receptionist who dismissed him months ago. The tour covered maintenance control rooms and equipment storage, workshops where repairs were staged, mechanical rooms that would become Marcus's domain. His team consisted of 8 technicians ranging from early 20s to late 50s, 2 supervisors, all of them sizing him up with varying degrees of skepticism. The office Jennifer showed him was small, but real. Desk, computer, filing cabinets stuffed with documentation on every system in the building. The team meeting at 9 felt like facing a firing squad. Robert Chen introduced Marcus with professional praise, but Marcus could read the doubt in several faces. When he stood to address them, he kept it simple and honest. I know I'm new. I know I have a lot to learn about this facility and how you all operate. But I've spent 15 years in the trenches fixing what breaks and preventing what can break. I'm not here to prove I'm smarter than you or boss anyone around. I'm here to work with you. Your experience matters. Your input matters. We're a team. Carl, the oldest technician with weathered hands and skeptical eyes, spoke up immediately. Heard you got hired through connections. That true? The room went quiet, everyone waiting to see how Marcus would handle the challenge. He met Carl's gaze directly. I know someone who vouched for me, yes, but I also scored 95 on the technical assessment. Highest in 5 years according to the guy who just got fired for trying to manipulate the hiring process. I'm here because I'm qualified, and I'm going to prove it every single day. Fair enough? Carl studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. Fair enough. We'll see. The first weeks were careful observation and deliberate restraint. Marcus walked every system with each technician, asking questions, taking notes, learning the quirks that separated textbook knowledge from practical reality. Carl showed him the East Wing boiler that had been temperamental for months, three contractors failing to identify the problem. Marcus spent an hour examining connections and tracing lines before finding what others had missed. A pressure sensor installed backwards during a previous repair, creating false readings that triggered safety shutdowns. 30 minutes to fix properly, and the boiler ran perfectly afterward. Carl grunted something that might have been approval. All right, maybe you do know your stuff. By the third week, Marcus noticed the pattern in maintenance logs. Entirely reactive, always responding to emergencies, never preventing them. He proposed a preventive maintenance schedule at the next team meeting, met resistance from technicians who saw extra work up front. Less work long-term, Marcus countered, and fewer 2 a.m. emergency calls pulling you away from your families. Let's pilot it in one building. If it doesn't work, we go back to the old way. Results came within 2 weeks. 60% reduction in emergency calls, 0 tenant complaints about temperature control, the team actually getting weekends off. The resistance evaporated. They rolled the program out to all properties under Marcus's supervision. Robert Chen forwarded an email from corporate expressing satisfaction with the measurable improvements. But the real transformation happened in spaces between work. Victoria had texted him Friday afternoon of his second week. Coffee tomorrow, 10 a.m., our table? Marcus had arrived early, ordered black coffee, sat by the window watching people pass. When Victoria walked in, she wore jeans and a sweater instead of business attire, walls already lower than their first meeting. She slid into the chair across from him with a smile that made his chest warm. So, you survived 2 weeks. Think you'll make it to 3? Depends. Am I allowed to keep having coffee with you? Or does that violate some unwritten corporate policy? Victoria's laugh was genuine, unguarded. I think we're safe. Derek's gone, my father approves, and frankly, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I'd like to keep doing this. Coffee, getting to know each other without accident trauma or job interviews in the way. Would you? Yeah, I really would. They talked for 3 hours that morning, conversation flowing easily from work to Emma and Sophie, to books and movies and the small details that built intimacy. When they finally left, Victoria had kissed his cheek and said, "Same time next week." Saturday morning coffee became their standing appointment. By October's end, it had expanded to Tuesday dinners when Emma had chess club and Sophie had ballet. They talked about everything except the accident, deliberately building something that existed independently of trauma. Victoria's walls came down slowly, piece by piece, revealing a woman who'd learned to weaponize coldness, because vulnerability had cost too much. Her ex-husband had seen dollar signs where partnership should be, had networked at their wedding reception instead of dancing with his bride, had scheduled business calls during Sophie's birth and acted like Victoria was unreasonable for wanting him present when their daughter took first steps. The divorce had been clean and brutal. He'd taken his settlement and disappeared into a new marriage with a woman whose father owned a venture capital firm. Marcus told her about Sarah, the VA hospital nurse who'd been patient and kind when his anxiety spiked during his exit physical. How she'd written her number on his discharge papers with a note that said, "Call me if you ever want to talk to someone who gets it." How their courtship had been quiet and gentle, 2 people choosing to build something light after too much darkness. How she'd been 8 months pregnant when complications started. How doctors said they could save one, but not both. And Sarah had chosen Emma without hesitation. Had held Marcus's hand and made him promise to be enough for their daughter, to give her the life Sarah wouldn't see. How Marcus had held his newborn daughter in his dying wife's hands simultaneously. Something in him shattering and reforming into whatever shape was necessary to keep that promise. Victoria had cried when he told her, tears she didn't bother hiding. "You've been keeping that promise every single day since. Sarah would be so proud." The words had settled into Marcus's chest like absolution he hadn't known he needed. Their first kiss happened the last Tuesday of October, after dinner where they'd argued good-naturedly about whether Die Hard qualified as a Christmas movie. Victoria walked Marcus to his truck, both lingering in the parking lot despite the cold. She looked up at him with gray-green eyes that no longer held walls. "I want to kiss you," she'd said with characteristic directness. "But I need you to know I'm terrified of getting this wrong, of hurting Sophie if this doesn't work, of—" Marcus had cupped her face in his hands. "I'm terrified too, but I think we'd both regret not trying more than we'd regret trying and failing." She kissed him then, tentative at first, then deeper when his arms wrapped around her. When they finally broke apart, Victoria had rested her forehead against his chest. "We should tell the girls soon. Before they figure it out and feel betrayed, we kept secrets." They'd introduced the relationship over Thanksgiving weekend, low-key, casual, framing it as Dad's friend Victoria and her daughter Sophie coming for dinner. The girls had looked at each other, looked at the adults trying too hard to seem normal, and burst into giggles. Sophie had announced with 6-year-old certainty, "We already knew." Emma's dad smiles at his phone all the time now. Emma had nodded with sage wisdom. "And your mom hums when she's cooking. She didn't used to do that." The adults had exchanged glances, caught by their daughter's observational skills, relieved by their easy acceptance. The evening dissolved into laughter and board games. Sophie sitting in Marcus's lap while he helped with Uno, Emma teaching Victoria chess moves from her club. It felt like family in a way that made Marcus's chest ache with wanting it to last. 3 days later, Victoria stayed after the girls fell asleep, curled against Marcus on the couch with his arm around her waist. She'd been quiet for a while before speaking. "I need to tell you something, and I'm terrified of how it changes things." Marcus's heart had stuttered. "Okay." Victoria had lifted her head to look at him directly. "These past 2 months they've been everything I hoped for when I called you about that second interview. Getting to know you, watching Emma and Sophie become friends, building this life together. It's made me happier than I've been since before my marriage fell apart." She'd paused, taken a breath, and her eyes were shining. "Marcus, I'm not falling in love with you. I've already fallen. I love you. I love how you show up for Emma every single day. I love that you refuse to compromise your integrity even when it costs you everything. I love that you make me laugh and challenge me and see me as Victoria instead of just Morris and money. I love you, and I needed you to know." Marcus had set down his glass, crossed to kneel in front of her, and taken her hands. "I love you too." The words came easier than expected. "I've loved you since that coffee shop when you almost walked out because I was an idiot about class. I loved you when you called your father to fight for me. I love how fierce you are with Sophie, how you balance being Morrison's daughter with being your own person. You're everything, Victoria. Everything I didn't know I needed." She'd kissed him then, deep and thorough and full of months of restraint, finally given permission. When they pulled apart, Emma's voice had come from the hallway, carefully neutral. "So, are you guys dating for real now? Because Sophie and I have been wondering when you'd figure it out." Sophie had appeared behind Emma. "They're in love. We knew for months." Marcus and Victoria had looked at each other and started laughing, the girls joining them until all four were tangled together on the couch. Later, after Sophie had been tucked into the guest bed and Emma into hers, Victoria had pulled a small box from her purse. "It's not a ring, and that comes later when we're both ready, but it's a promise." She had opened it to reveal a simple silver bracelet with 2 charms, E and S. For Emma and Sophie, for us building a family together. Marcus had fastened it around her wrist, then pulled her close. "I want all of it. Every morning, every challenge, every moment. I want to be there when Sophie loses her first tooth and when Emma learns to drive. Want to build something that lasts." They'd held each other under the kitchen light, Emma and Sophie spying from the hallway, high-fiving silently at their successful matchmaking. Marcus should have known that wanting something that much meant the universe would test whether he deserved to keep it. Jennifer Parks stopped by his office on a Wednesday morning in early December, expression apologetic. "Quick heads up, Derek Hammond technically still has 2 weeks before his Vegas transfer is official. He's been in and out of the building this week, transitioning responsibilities. If you see him, just be professional. Don't engage beyond what's necessary." Unease crawled down Marcus's spine. "Thanks for the warning." The email arrived that afternoon with Derek's name in the sender line and urgent maintenance request in the subject. Marcus opened it, stomach already tightening. The entire HVAC system in the West Wing needed comprehensive inspection by end of week, detailed report required for Monday board meeting. Normally a 2-week job compressed into 4 days. The team was already at capacity with routine maintenance and 2 emergency repairs from the cold snap. Marcus called Derek's extension. This timeline isn't realistic. West Wing has the most complex system in the facility. Derek's voice came through smooth, professional. I understand it's challenging, Marcus, but the board specifically requested this inspection as part of year-end review. Robert Chen approved the timeline. If you're not comfortable managing it, I can reassign to someone with more experience in large-scale assessments. The threat was clear. Fail and Derek would use it as evidence Marcus wasn't qualified. Succeed and prove nothing except you could work your team into exhaustion. We'll handle it. The next 4 days were brutal. Marcus and his team worked 12-hour shifts, crawling through ductwork and mechanical rooms, testing every component, documenting every measurement. Marcus worked alongside them, hands-on, not directing from an office, which earned points with the crew but left him exhausted in ways that went beyond physical. They finished Friday evening barely, Marcus submitting a comprehensive 50-page report at 11:47 p.m. He drove home in a fog of fatigue, fell into bed without showering, slept through his Saturday alarm. Woke to text from Victoria. "Everything okay? You were supposed to meet me for coffee an hour ago." Marcus called immediately, voice rough with sleep. "I'm so sorry. Work has been insane. Derek assigned this impossible inspection and..." "Derek's still there?" Victoria's tone shifted from concern to sharp. "I thought he was supposed to be gone by now." "2 more weeks, technically. He's been making things difficult." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Be careful, Marcus. Derek doesn't forget slights. And he has access to systems he shouldn't still have. I'm going to talk to my father about expediting his transfer." But she was too late. Monday morning, Marcus arrived to find an email from Derek sent at 2:47 a.m. "Report insufficient. West Wing inspection incomplete. Multiple systems not documented. Board meeting rescheduled but expecting comprehensive results by Wednesday. Please redo entire assessment." Marcus stared at the screen, fury and disbelief warring in his chest. He'd documented every single system, had triple-checked before submitting. This was sabotage, pure and simple. And there was no possible way to redo a 2-week inspection in 2 days. He called Robert Chen. "I need to talk about Derek Hammond's email." Robert's sigh carried exhaustion. "Just saw it. Marcus, I'm going to be honest. I didn't approve that original timeline. Derek sent that request under my name, and I've reviewed your report. It's thorough, comprehensive. Derek's claiming systems are missing, but every system I can verify is documented. I think he's setting you up to fail. What do I do?" "Submit what you can by Wednesday. I'll be in that board meeting to back you up. And Marcus, start documenting everything Derek asked you to do. Every email, every request. We may need it." Marcus spent Monday and Tuesday in the West Wing, team working overtime again, double-checking systems they had already checked, photographing documentation to prove completion. But something nagged at him, some instinct from military days that said the trap was bigger than just an impossible deadline. Wednesday morning at 6:23 a.m., Marcus's phone exploded with emergency calls. The central cooling system in the main hotel tower had completely failed. 500 guests sweltering in rooms despite December cold outside. The backup system wasn't engaging. Computer controls showed cascade failures across multiple points. Marcus and his entire team rushed to the site, working through morning into afternoon, manually overriding safeties, bypassing corrupted controls, jury-rigging solutions that would hold until proper repairs could be scheduled. By 4 p.m., they had the system limping along, good enough to keep guests comfortable, not good enough to be permanent. But Marcus had found something during repairs, evidence that someone had deliberately disabled the backup system and corrupted computer controls. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was sabotage. And the access log showed commands entered remotely from an IP address that, when Lisa traced it through her IT contacts, originated from Summit Ridge's Las Vegas property, from Derek Hammond's office. Lisa appeared at Marcus's shoulder, laptop in hand. I've been monitoring network security since you mentioned possible sabotage last week. I have everything, access logs, keystroke records, authentication tokens, even recovered deleted emails between Derek and a former employee discussing ways to make Williams fail. It's comprehensive, time-stamped, independently verified. She looked at Marcus with fierce certainty. He did this, and we can prove it. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Park. Emergency board meeting called for 5 p.m. Conference room 14. You're expected to present on the system failure and West Wing inspection status. His stomach dropped. 5 p.m., 1 hour from now. He was covered in grease and sweat from emergency repairs, had evidence of Derek's sabotage but no time to prepare a presentation, would be walking into a conference room full of executives who'd decide once and for all if Marcus Williams was competent or just connected. He pulled out his phone, texted Victoria. Board meeting at 5. Derek sabotaged the system. This is it. Her response came immediately. I'm coming. You're not facing this alone. Meet you there in 30. Marcus looked at Lisa. Can you get all that evidence onto my tablet? Everything that proves Derek did this? Already done. I'll be in that meeting too. They'll need it to verify the technical details. Marcus drove to Summit Ridge headquarters with his heart hammering, changed into the spare shirt he kept in his truck, but couldn't do anything about the grease stains on his pants or the smell of mechanical rooms clinging to his skin. He arrived at the 14th floor, the same floor where Derek had tried to buy his silence months ago, with 15 minutes to spare. Victoria was waiting by the elevators, dressed in business attire that signaled she was here for his Morrison heiress, not just Marcus's girlfriend. She crossed to him immediately, took his hands despite the grime. Whatever happens in there, we face it together. You've proven yourself 100 times over. Derek's the one who should be afraid, not you. Marcus squeezed her hands. Thank you for being here, for believing in me. Always. They walked into the conference room together. Board members sat around a massive table, corporate executives, legal counsel, James Morrison at the head. Derek appeared on the video screen from Las Vegas, his expression professionally concerned in a way that made Marcus's blood boil. Jennifer gestured Marcus to a seat. Lisa sat in the back with her laptop. Victoria took a chair along the wall, technically observer, but her presence speaking volumes about whose side she was on. James Morrison's voice cut through the murmur. Let's begin. Mr. Williams, we're here to discuss today's system failure and concerns raised by Mr. Hammond about incomplete inspections. Derek, you called this meeting. Please present your case. Derek's voice came through speakers with practiced sympathy. Thank you, James. I want to start by saying I have great respect for Marcus Williams as a person. What he did at my daughter's accident was heroic. But he paused for effect. Heroism doesn't qualify someone for complex facilities management. Today's catastrophic system failure, combined with his incomplete West Wing inspection, demonstrates that we may have prioritized personal connections over professional competence. He pulled up a slide showing the failure costs, $50,000 in guest compensation, immeasurable reputation damage, multiple safety violations during the emergency repairs, and Mr. Williams's West Wing report, which I specifically requested to ensure building safety, is missing critical system documentation. I believe we need to seriously reconsider whether— Stop! Marcus's voice came out harder than intended. Board members turned to look at him. I'm going to save everyone time. Those access logs you're about to show, Derek, the ones suggesting my incompetent modifications caused today's failure, they're fabricated. He connected his tablet to the conference room display. What actually happened is that someone with remote admin access to our building management system deliberately disabled the backup cooling and corrupted the computer controls at 2:34 this morning. The commands were entered from an IP address in Las Vegas, from Summit Ridge's Las Vegas property, from Derek Hammond's office. The room went silent. Derek's face on screen had gone pale. That's ridiculous. Those logs can be faked. Mr. Williams is clearly trying to deflect. Lisa stood up. I'm Lisa Chen, IT support. I've been monitoring our network security for the past week. I have the complete digital trail, not just access logs, but keystroke records, authentication tokens, system backups showing exactly what commands were entered and when. I also have recovered deleted emails between Derek Hammond and a former employee discussing specific strategies to sabotage Mr. Williams' work. She looked directly at the camera showing Derek. The evidence is comprehensive, independently verified, and admissible. You did this. Marcus watched Derek's expression cycle through denial, rage, calculation. Finally, Derek tried, even if there was some technical anomaly, it doesn't change that Williams's West Wing report is incomplete. No, it's not. Robert Chen spoke up for the first time. I've reviewed Marcus's report personally. It documents every system in the West Wing comprehensively. The only person claiming it's incomplete is you, Derek. And given what we've just learned about your willingness to sabotage building systems, I think we can safely assume your assessment of Marcus's work is equally unreliable. James Morrison's expression had gone cold, fury contained behind professional composure. His voice came out quiet and deadly. Derek, I'm going to ask you one question, and I want a direct answer. Did you deliberately sabotage our building systems in an attempt to discredit Marcus Williams? Silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. Derek's face on screen showed a man realizing he'd lost, that no amount of deflection would save him now. The systems were already unstable. I just exposed weaknesses that's all I needed to hear. James cut him off. Derek Hammond, you're fired, effective immediately, not reassigned, fired. Security will escort you from the Las Vegas property within the hour. And if you come near any Morrison Property Group facility again, I'll have you arrested for corporate sabotage, property damage, and whatever else our legal team can make stick. Derek tried to protest, but James cut the video feed. The screen went dark. He turned to Marcus. Mr. Williams, I apologize. This should never have happened. Marcus sat in the conference room after most board members filed out, still processing what had just occurred. Derek was gone, truly finally gone. The threat that had loomed over his new position eliminated. He should feel relieved, vindicated, triumphant. Instead, he felt exhausted down to his bones. And when Victoria crossed to him and pulled him into a hug, despite the grease and sweat, Marcus held on to her and tried to believe the fight was actually over this time. You did it, she whispered against his shoulder. You proved yourself. You beat him. Marcus pulled back enough to see her face. We did it. I couldn't have gotten through today without you being here. Victoria cupped his face in her hands. That's what partnership means. We face things together, the good, the bad, and the Derek Hammonds of the world. Lisa appeared with a grin. For what it's worth, boss, you were pretty badass in there. Half the board looked ready to applaud when you called Derek out. Marcus managed a tired laugh. Thanks for having my back. I mean it. Without your evidence, this could have gone very differently. That's what teams do. What? Lisa squeezed his shoulder. Now go home, shower, sleep for like 12 hours. Tomorrow we'll start repairs on that system you jury-rigged, and I'll make sure our network security is bulletproof going forward. Marcus drove home with Victoria following in her own car, both of them picking up the girls from after-school care. Emma took one look at his face and demanded to know what happened. Sophie climbed into his lap without asking, small arms around his neck in 6-year-old comfort. He kept the explanation simple. Someone at work tried to make it look like I did something wrong, but we proved he was lying, and now he's gone for good. Emma studied him with 2 knowing eyes. Did you do the right thing even though it was hard? Marcus pulled her close alongside Sophie. Yeah, baby, I did. Then you won. That's what winning actually means. Later, after the girls were asleep and Victoria was curled against him on the couch, Marcus let himself process the day fully. Derek's final attempt to destroy him had failed. The board's apology had been genuine. His job was secure. More than secure. James Morrison had pulled him aside to mention that corporate was impressed with his performance under pressure, that opportunities for advancement existed for people who demonstrated both competence and character. But more than any professional victory, what settled deepest in Marcus's chest was the certainty that he hadn't faced Derek alone. Victoria had shown up. Lisa had prepared evidence. Robert had defended him. Emma and Sophie had offered comfort without needing to understand details. He'd built something real over these months, not just a career, but a support system, a family, a life worth protecting. Victoria's fingers traced patterns on his arm. What are you thinking about? That I'm lucky, that 6 months ago I was drowning and now I have, he gestured around the apartment, at the life they'd built. I have all of this. Have you? And it almost didn't happen because I was too proud and bitter to accept help. But you did accept help eventually. That's what matters. Victoria lifted her head to look at him. And now we get to build the rest of our lives without Derek's shadow over us. Get to focus on what actually matters. Us, the girls, the future. Marcus kissed her, soft and grateful. I love you. I love you too. Now come to bed before you fall asleep on this couch and wake up with a neck cramp. They went to bed holding hands, Marcus falling asleep almost immediately, exhausted but secure in ways that went beyond physical safety. Tomorrow he'd return to work and begin rebuilding what Derek had sabotaged. But tonight he could rest, knowing the fight was finally over, knowing the family he'd built would still be there when morning came. The promotion came through in September, nearly a year after Marcus had first walked into Summit Ridge hotels covered in gasoline and desperation. Regional Facilities Director for Morrison Property Group's Western Division. 12 properties across 3 states, a team of 43 people, salary that made Marcus blink at the offer letter 3 times before accepting. Emma had screamed when he told her, then immediately asked if this meant they could finally get a dog. Sophie had lobbied hard for 2 dogs, reasoning that sisters shouldn't have to share. Victoria had kissed him in the kitchen while the girls debated dog breeds, whispered against his mouth that she was proud of him, that he'd earned every bit of this success through competence in character. Her father had called the next day with gruff congratulations and an invitation to join the family Labor Day weekend at their place in Lake Tahoe. Casual phrasing that carried weight, Marcus understood. This wasn't just a vacation invite. This was James Morrison signaling acceptance into the inner circle, the kind of validation that couldn't be bought or faked. The Tahoe house turned out to be a sprawling timber frame lodge with enough bedrooms for an army and a dock stretching into water so clear Marcus could see 20 feet down. Emma and Sophie spent the weekend in life jackets, shrieking as James drove them around the lake on his boat, coming back sunburned and giddy. Victoria's mother, Catherine, elegant and sharp-eyed in ways that reminded Marcus uncomfortably of a general conducting reconnaissance, had cornered him on the deck Saturday evening while Victoria was putting the girls to bed. My daughter's been hurt before, Catherine had started without preamble, sipping wine that probably cost more than Marcus's first car. Married a man who saw dollar signs instead of a person. Gave him 2 years trying to make it work before she finally accepted that you can't build intimacy with someone who views love as a transaction. Marcus had kept his expression neutral, military training kicking in. Yes, ma'am. Victoria's different now, softer when she's with you. Laughs more. Sophie's happier too, less anxious, more secure. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Catherine's eyes had fixed on him with laser precision. But if you hurt my daughter or my granddaughter, you'll discover that Morrison money can make people disappear in ways that don't involve violence. Am I clear? Crystal clear, ma'am, but for what it's worth, Marcus had met her gaze directly. I'd rather set myself on fire than hurt either of them. Victoria and Sophie aren't my second chance at happiness. They're my reason to keep being the kind of man who deserves happiness in the first place. Catherine had studied him for a long moment, then smiled with genuine warmth for the first time that weekend. Good answer. Welcome to the family, Marcus. Try the salmon. James caught it this morning and he'll be insufferable if no one eats it. The conversation had felt like passing a test Marcus hadn't known he was taking. That night, lying in bed with Victoria curled against his side, he'd told her about the exchange. She'd laughed into his chest. My mother's been threatening my boyfriend since I was 16. You're the first one who didn't run. Her fingers traced patterns on his shoulder. Also the first one she's actually liked, according to the text she sent me while you two were talking. Apparently you have good bone structure and better character, which from Catherine Morrison is basically a marriage proposal. Marcus had gone still. Marriage. Victoria had propped herself up on one elbow, meeting his eyes in the moonlight filtering through the curtains. Eventually, when we're ready, when the girls are ready, when it feels right instead of rushed. Her voice had softened. But yeah, Marcus, I want to marry you someday. Want you to be my partner in everything. Finances, parenting, the boring grocery shopping, and the exciting vacations. Want to build a life that's ours, not just mine or yours. Marcus had pulled her down for a kiss that had turned into more, bodies saying what words couldn't quite capture. Yes, and always, and thank God I found you. October brought parent-teacher conferences at Emma's school, which Marcus attended with Victoria because Sophie had transferred districts to be in the same building as Emma. The girls sat together at lunch now, did homework side by side, defended each other with fierce loyalty when anyone suggested they weren't real sisters. Mrs. Patterson, Emma's teacher, had smiled knowingly when Marcus and Victoria arrived together. Emma talks about Sophie constantly, and Sophie's teacher tells me the feeling's mutual. It's lovely seeing blended families work so well. The girls clearly feel secure and loved. She'd pulled out Emma's portfolio. Emma's grades have improved significantly since last year. She's more confident, participates more in class. Whatever's changed at home, it's working. What had changed was that Emma no longer woke up afraid they'd lose electricity or that Marcus would skip meals so she could eat. What had changed was having Sophie as a constant companion. Victoria as a presence who showed up to school events and remembered to pack the special snacks Emma liked. What had changed was that their apartment felt like a home instead of a bunker against poverty. Marcus had held Victoria's hand walking back to the car, Emma and Sophie racing ahead toward the playground for a few minutes before dinner. His chest had felt full enough to burst. "We're doing okay at this," Victoria had observed, squeezing his fingers. "The parenting together thing, the being a team thing. Yeah, we really are." November arrived with Thanksgiving plans that required careful negotiation. Victoria's parents wanted everyone at their estate in Atherton. Formal dining, multiple courses, the kind of production that made Marcus anxious about which fork to use. Emma had lobbied hard for their own tradition of pizza and movies, the casual intimacy she'd grown up with. Sophie had wanted both, with the diplomatic skills of a child who'd learned to navigate divorced parents' competing holidays. They'd compromised. Thanksgiving Day with the Morrisons, Black Friday just the four of them in pajamas eating leftovers and watching Christmas movies. The formal dinner had gone better than Marcus expected. James had insisted Marcus sit beside him, spending the meal asking detailed questions about facilities management that suggested genuine interest rather than polite obligation. Catherine had fussed over Emma's dress and Sophie's hair with grandmother enthusiasm that transcended biology. Victoria's younger brother Derek, not to be confused with Derek Hammond, a point James had joked about darkly, had cornered Marcus in the study afterward with bourbon and questions about military service that led to an hour-long conversation about deployments and readjustment and the civilian world's inability to understand what you'd seen. Black Friday found them sprawled across Marcus's living room in a nest of blankets, Sophie asleep on Victoria's lap, Emma's head resting against Marcus's shoulder as Elf played for the third time because the girls couldn't agree on anything else. Victoria's hand had found Marcus's, fingers intertwining, and something had shifted in his chest, a decision clicking into place with the certainty of a bolt sliding home. He wanted this forever. Not eventually, not someday. Forever, permanent, no more splitting time between households or explaining to people whether they were serious. He wanted Victoria as his wife, Sophie as his daughter-in-law and love, if not biology, Emma secure in the knowledge that her family was complete. Wanted the bracelet he'd given Victoria 6 months ago to be followed by a ring that meant promises kept. The ring took Marcus 3 weeks to find. He'd enlisted Emma's help, which turned into both girls accompanying him to 4 different jewelers, while Victoria thought they were at a movie. Emma had vetoed anything too flashy. Victoria likes elegant, Dad, not sparkly, while Sophie had argued for the biggest diamond possible with 6-year-old logic. They'd finally agreed on a platinum band with 3 small diamonds, simple and classic and exactly right. The proposal required more planning. Marcus wanted meaningful, not showy, wanted it to be about them, not about expense or production value. He'd settled on the coffee shop where they'd first reconnected, the table by the window where Victoria had almost walked out on him, and he'd learned to set aside pride long enough to accept grace. He'd contacted the owner, explained the situation, secured the table for Saturday afternoon at 2. Emma and Sophie were spending the day with Catherine, who'd been thrilled to be included in the conspiracy. James had given Marcus his blessing 3 days earlier during a meeting Marcus had requested at Morrison Property Group headquarters, saying that any man brave enough to ask permission from a protective father deserved whatever happiness he could grab. Saturday arrived with December sunshine and Marcus's nerves jangling like live wires. He got to the coffee shop early, habit and anxiety combining, and sat at their table with the black coffee growing cold in front of him. The ring box felt heavy in his jacket pocket, a weight that had nothing to do with platinum and everything to do with how completely his life would change if Victoria said yes. How devastated he'd be if she said no. Victoria walked in at exactly 2, wearing jeans and a sweater the color of pine trees, her hair down the way he loved. She spotted him and her face lit up with the smile that still made his heart stutter. Crossed to the table and slid into her chair, reaching for his hand automatically. "Hey you, what's with the mysterious 'meet me at our coffee shop' text? Not that I'm complaining. I'll take any excuse to see you, but the girls have been giggling all morning and won't tell me why." Marcus took a breath, felt his carefully prepared speech evaporate, and went with honesty instead. "A year ago, I sat in this chair and almost lost you before we'd even started. Because I was bitter and suspicious and couldn't accept that sometimes people help because it's the right thing to do, not because they want something in return." Victoria's expression shifted, walls lowering completely as she heard the seriousness in his tone. Marcus continued, words coming faster now. "You could have walked away. Should have walked away. I basically accused you of trying to buy me. But you stayed long enough to make me understand that character isn't about what class you're born into. It's about what you choose to do when it costs you something. You saved my life as much as I saved yours at that accident. More maybe, because you gave me back my faith that good things could happen to people who chose integrity over survival." He pulled the ring box from his pocket, opened it, watched Victoria's eyes go wide and fill with tears. "I love you. I love Sophie like she's mine, which she is in every way that matters. I want to wake up next to you every morning and figure out how to parent teenagers together and grow old watching our girls build their own lives. I want to be your partner in everything, the boring parts and the beautiful parts and all the messy, complicated parts that come with blending families and building something from scratch." Marcus slid out of his chair, dropped to one knee beside the table, the same way soldiers had done for centuries when swearing oaths that mattered. "Victoria Morrison, will you marry me?" Victoria's tears spilled over, but she was smiling, hands covering her mouth. "Yes, God, yes, Marcus. Yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly, and Victoria pulled him up to kiss him, both of them laughing and crying and not caring that the entire coffee shop had stopped to watch. Someone started clapping. Then everyone joined in, and Victoria buried her face in Marcus's shoulder while he held her and thought that sometimes life gave you exactly what you needed in the exact moment you were finally ready to receive it. They picked up the girls from Catherine's house an hour later, both of them wearing grins that made Emma and Sophie bounce with anticipation. Marcus had barely gotten the car in park before Sophie burst out, "Did she say yes? Is my mom going to marry your dad?" Victoria held up her left hand, showing the ring. She said yes. The shrieking was loud enough to make Marcus wince and laugh simultaneously. Emma threw her arms around him while Sophie climbed into Victoria's lap, both girls talking over each other about being real sisters now and whether they could be flower girls and if this meant they got to live in the same house all the time. Catherine appeared on the porch with James, both of them smiling with grandparent satisfaction. Victoria caught Marcus's eye over Sophie's head, mouthed, "I love you," and Marcus felt something settle deep in his chest. This was what he'd promised Sarah 9 years ago when she died giving him Emma, that he'd build their daughter a good life, give her love and security and family. He'd kept that promise through poverty and desperation, in moments when he'd been certain he was failing. And now, watching Emma glow with happiness while Sophie chattered about wedding dresses, Marcus understood that promises kept had a way of echoing forward, building foundations strong enough to support futures you couldn't have imagined. The wedding was set for June, Enough time for planning without feeling rushed, letting the girls adjust to the reality of their parents' marriage instead of just the idea. Victoria moved into Marcus's apartment in January. Her place was technically nicer, but this had been home first, the space where they'd built their initial foundation. They'd repaint, she'd insisted, maybe knock down a wall to make the kitchen bigger. But the bones were good, and the memories mattered. Sophie transferred her bedroom over a long weekend, Emma helping her arrange stuffed animals and books with the intense seriousness of a 7-year-old, ensuring her sister felt welcome. The girls had started calling each other's parents mom and dad without anyone prompting it, Sophie asking Marcus to help with math homework, and Emma showing Victoria the bracelet she wanted for her birthday. The terms of endearment had made both adults cry the first few times, overwhelmed by how seamlessly their children had woven themselves into each other's lives. February brought Valentine's Day and Marcus's first serious argument with Victoria. Not about love or commitment, those were solid, but about money. Specifically about whether Marcus would let Victoria combine their finances or continue maintaining completely separate accounts as if they weren't building a life together. Victoria had presented her case over dinner after the girls were asleep. Spreadsheets and investment portfolios and estate planning documents spread across the kitchen table. We're getting married in 4 months. We need to discuss financial integration, joint accounts, beneficiaries, asset allocation. My portfolio alone generates enough passive income to... No. Marcus's voice had come out harder than he'd intended. We're not living on your money. I make good salary now, more than enough to support our family. I don't need... This isn't about need. This is about partnership. Victoria's eyes had flashed, walls going up defensively. Why is it okay for me to move into your apartment and parent your daughter, but not okay to share financial resources because that's what you're saying, that you'll accept some parts of partnership, but not others? Marcus had stood, paced to the sink, stared out the window at nothing. I spent 6 months drowning in poverty, watching Emma go hungry, failing at the most basic requirement of fatherhood, providing. I cannot go back to being dependent on someone else's money. Cannot build our life on a foundation that isn't mine to control. It's not someone else's money. It's our money. Victoria had crossed to stand beside him, voice softening. Marcus, I understand pride. I understand wanting to feel like you're providing, but you're letting past trauma dictate present decisions. We're partners. That means my resources are your resources. Your burdens are my burdens. You can't have it both ways. Can't say you want to build life together while refusing to actually combine our lives. The argument had lasted 2 hours, both of them saying things they'd regretted, Marcus's pride clashing with Victoria's frustration at being pushed away from full partnership. They'd gone to bed angry for the first time since getting together, lying on opposite sides with careful space between their bodies. Marcus had woken at 3 a.m. to find Victoria sitting on the bathroom floor crying, trying to muffle the sound. He'd sat beside her without speaking, waited until she could form words. My ex-husband only wanted me for the money, saw dollar signs instead of a person. And now you're pushing me away because of the money, refusing to let me be an equal partner because you can't separate Victoria, the person, from Victoria, the Morrison heiress. So either way, the money ruins everything. Either people want me for it or they resent me for having it. But nobody, her voice had broken. Nobody just accepts that it exists and moves on to the actual relationship. Marcus had felt like he'd been kicked in the chest, had pulled Victoria into his lap, held her while she cried, forced himself to examine the ugly truth she'd just revealed. His pride wasn't protecting their family. It was building walls that kept Victoria from being fully seen, fully accepted. Was making her feel like the money mattered more than the person, which was exactly what she'd been trying to escape. You're right, he'd whispered into her hair. I'm being an idiot. Not about the money itself, about what refusing it means. I'm telling you that I can't trust you completely, that I need an escape route, that some part of me sees you as Morrison heiress instead of just Victoria. And that's God, that's exactly what everyone else does to you. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Victoria had lifted her head, eyes red and raw. I don't need you to live on my money. Don't need you to quit your job and be a kept man, but I need you to stop treating my resources like they're poison. To accept that what's mine is yours because we're building this together. Can you do that? Marcus had kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. Yeah, I can do that. I will do that. We'll set up joint accounts tomorrow. Combine everything. Be actual partners instead of roommates who love each other. They'd made love afterward, tender and necessary, bodies speaking promises that mouths had struggled to articulate. In the morning, they'd sat the girls down and explained that families share everything, space and time and resources, because that's what partnership meant. Emma had asked if this meant Sophie's allowance would increase Marcus's budget, displaying 7-year-old logic that made both adults laugh until they cried. The joint accounts were established by March, Victoria's name added to Marcus's savings, and his name added to her investment portfolio. Marcus had tried not to look at the numbers too closely. Seeing how many zeros existed in Victoria's accounts made his head spin. But she'd been right. Knowing the money existed and choosing to build on their combined foundation instead of just his limited one didn't diminish his contribution. It just made them stronger together than either could be separately. April brought wedding planning intensity that made Marcus grateful for his project management experience. Victoria had hired a coordinator who treated the event like a military campaign, complete with timelines and contingencies and backup vendors. The ceremony would be at Catherine's estate garden, reception in a tent overlooking the bay, guest list hovering around 200 people that Victoria kept trying to trim, and Catherine kept expanding. Emma and Sophie were co-flower girls, dresses already selected after a marathon trying-on session that had required bribery with ice cream. James was walking Victoria down the aisle despite her initial protest that she could walk herself. Marcus had been the one to talk her into accepting, pointing out that fathers needed rituals too, that letting James participate wasn't about property transfer, but about honoring the relationship they'd rebuilt after years of corporate-focused distance. The bachelor party was low-key at Marcus's request. Dinner with Robert Chen and a few guys from work, Carl telling increasingly unbelievable stories about fixes he'd made over 30 years in the trades. No strippers, no Vegas, just good food and better company. The bachelorette party was similarly tame, according to Victoria. Spa day, followed by dinner. Catherine insisting on paying for everything and getting mildly drunk on champagne while dispensing advice about marriage that made Victoria text Marcus afterward. Apparently, the secret to 40-year marriages is separate bathrooms and never going to bed angry. Who knew? May brought final preparations and Marcus's growing realization that this was actually happening, that in 4 weeks he'd be married to Victoria Morrison, that Emma and Sophie would legally be sisters, that his life had transformed so completely from the desperate poverty of 18 months ago that it felt like a different existence entirely. The final crisis came 2 weeks before the wedding. Marcus got a call from Emma's school. She'd been in a fight, which was so unlike his conflict-averse daughter that Marcus left a meeting mid-sentence and drove straight over. Found Emma in the principal's office with a split lip and tear-streaked face. Another girl, Madison, according to her name tag, sporting a bloody nose and defiant expression. The principal had explained tersely, Madison had been bullying Sophie about her parents' marriage being fake since they weren't biologically related. Emma had told her to stop. Madison had called Sophie a name Marcus wouldn't repeat. Emma had punched her. Emma, who'd never thrown a punch in her life, who cried during Disney movies and rescued spiders instead of squashing them, had broken another child's nose defending her sister. Marcus had driven both girls home in silence, Victoria meeting them at the apartment after picking Sophie up from her classroom. The girls had sat on the couch awaiting judgment while the adults conferred quietly in the kitchen. She shouldn't have hit Madison, Victoria had started. Violence isn't the answer, and she needs consequences. But Madison deserved it, Marcus had finished. And Emma was protecting her sister, which is, God, I don't know how to discipline her for that without sending the wrong message. They'd settled on grounding Emma from screens for a week while praising her for defending Sophie, trying to thread the impossible needle of teaching that violence was wrong while violence in defense of family felt deeply right. Emma had accepted the consequences solemnly, then looked at both parents with unusual intensity. Madison said Sophie wasn't my real sister because we don't have the same parents. But that's stupid, right? Because family isn't about biology, It's about who you choose to protect, who you'd punch people for. Her voice had gone fierce, adult determination in a 7-year-old frame. Sophie's my sister, forever. Nothing Madison or anyone else says changes that. Sophie had thrown her arms around Emma, both girls crying now, and Victoria had grabbed Marcus's hand hard enough to hurt. They'd ended up in a group hug on the couch, all four of them tangled together, and Marcus had thought that this, right here, was what family actually meant. Not genetics or legal documents, but the fierce choice to claim each other, to fight for each other, to build something from shared love instead of biological accident. The wedding day arrived with June sunshine and Marcus's hands shaking so badly he needed Robert Chen's help with his tie. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. in the garden, but Marcus arrived at noon for photos and final preparations, spending the interim in a guest house, trying not to think about everything that could go wrong. James found him at 2:30, handed him a scotch, and settled into the chair across with the air of a man delivering important intelligence. "You're spiraling. Stop it." Marcus attempted a laugh. "That obvious? You've checked your watch 6 times in the past minute, and you're not actually drinking that scotch, just holding it. So yeah, obvious." James took a sip of his own drink. "Cold feet?" "Terrified feet. Not about marrying Victoria, that's the only thing I'm certain about. But about..." Marcus struggled to articulate the fear. "What if I'm not enough? What if 10 years from now, she realizes she married a guy who fixes HVAC systems while she could have had someone from her world? Someone who understands private jets and charity galas and someone boring as hell who'd see her as a trophy instead of a partner?" James's voice carried unexpected heat. "Marcus, listen to me. I've watched my daughter date extensively. Watched her marry wrong the first time and spend years trying to convince herself love could be built on common tax brackets. You know what I've never seen until you? I've never seen her relaxed. Never seen her laugh the way she laughs with you. Like she doesn't have to perform or manage or control everything. Never seen her walls fully down." James leaned forward, expression serious. "You saved my daughter's life twice. Once from that burning car, and once from believing she'd always have to choose between love and being herself. So stop wondering if you're enough. You're exactly what she needs. The rest is just logistics." The ceremony started at 4 on the dot, processional music floating through the garden as guests settled into white chairs arranged in careful rows. Marcus stood at the altar with his best man, Robert, beside him, watching Emma and Sophie walk down the aisle, scattering rose petals with varying degrees of accuracy. Then Victoria appeared on James's arm, and everything else dissolved into background noise. She wore a simple ivory dress, elegant without being ostentatious, her hair partly up with flowers woven through the dark strands. But it was her expression that unmade Marcus completely. Joy unguarded, love written across every feature. Walls demolished until there was nothing minor left but Victoria choosing him in front of 200 witnesses and forever. The ceremony blurred into impressions, the officiant talking about partnership and choosing each other daily. Victoria's hands shaking slightly when Marcus slid the wedding band onto her finger. His own voice rough with emotion promising to love and honor and protect. The moment the officiant pronounced them married and Marcus kissed his wife while their daughters cheered and the crowd applauded, and everything Marcus had survived to reach this moment suddenly felt worth it. Every hour of poverty, every moment of fear, every choice that cost him something in service of integrity. The reception was a blur of congratulations and champagne, dinner speeches that made everyone laugh and cry, James telling stories about Victoria's childhood that mortified his daughter and delighted the crowd. Emma and Sophie monopolized the dance floor, spinning in their flower girl dresses until they were dizzy. Catherine cornered Marcus during dessert to inform him she'd established education trusts for both girls, equal amounts, because grandchildren shouldn't be distinguished by biology when love made them equivalent. Marcus danced with Victoria as the sun set over the bay, holding his wife close while she whispered against his ear, "Best decision I ever made, saying yes to you." "Second best," Marcus had countered. "First best was not walking away from me in that coffee shop when I was an idiot about your money." Victoria had laughed, bright and free. "Third best then. Second best was stalking you through a private investigator until I found you. First best was getting in that car the day of the accident, because if I'd stayed home sick like I planned, we never would have met. So really thank God for timing and near-death experiences. They'd kissed while their daughters watched from the edges of the dance floor, Emma and Sophie grinning at each other with the satisfaction of children who'd known all along their parents belonged together. The honeymoon was a week in Hawaii, Big Island, where they could snorkel and hike without the crowds. Catherine kept the girls, spoiling them relentlessly according to the photos she texted daily. Marcus and Victoria spent 7 days being nothing except husband and wife, learning each other's rhythms without the demands of work or parenting. They talked about buying a bigger house, maybe in the suburbs where the girls could have a yard, about whether they wanted more children. Victoria was 36, still possible if they didn't wait too long, but maybe their blended family was already complete. About the future spreading before them like uncharted territory they'd mapped together. On the last night, lying in bed with Victoria's head on his chest and the ocean audible through open windows, Marcus had thought about the moment that changed everything. Standing at that accident scene 18 months ago, choosing between his interview and his conscience, certain he was losing his only chance at saving Emma from poverty. Turned out he hadn't lost anything. He'd just been trading one future for a better one, even though he couldn't have known it at the time. Sometimes doing the right thing cost you everything you thought you needed, only to give you back things you didn't know you'd been missing. Sometimes the universe rewarded integrity not immediately, but eventually, in ways that made the waiting worthwhile. They returned to California in August to news that Marcus had been promoted again, Vice President of Facilities Operations for Morrison Property Group's entire portfolio. The title came with salary that made Marcus dizzy, responsibilities that excited rather than overwhelmed him, respect earned through competence instead of connections. He accepted, knowing now that success didn't diminish who he was or where he'd come from. It just meant he'd climbed far enough to pull others up behind him. Emma started third grade and Sophie second at the same school, their teacher recognizing them as sisters without question. The new house, 4 bedrooms in Palo Alto with a yard and a dog they'd named Widget after extensive family debate, became home by October. Marcus hung the photo from their wedding in the front hallway, Victoria and him and Emma and Sophie all laughing at something long forgotten, captured proof that families could be built from choice and love instead of just biology. Some nights Marcus still woke from dreams about that accident scene, about choosing his interview over helping, about arriving on time only to discover the job wasn't worth his daughter's respect. But Victoria would pull him close in those moments, grounding him in the reality they'd built. This bed, this house, this life they'd chosen together. And Marcus would remember that the best decisions weren't always the easy ones, that integrity mattered more than convenience, that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted was actually finding everything you'd been missing.